Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today we are resuming our look at Doctor Who Series 14 slash Season 1 with Episode 3, Boom, written by Stephen Moffat. As always, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place, just in case I do decide to talk about spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode in question yet, Boom, now is your chance to pause the video, go watch it, and then come back and listen to my thoughts. And apologies again, just because of work stuff, my schedule is still wonky. Next week, I believe my schedule is going back to normal, so these should start going up Sunday when I had them planned to. Boom is a decent episode from Stephen Moffat. It's a one-off from Stephen Moffat, so the quality is better than a lot of his scripts, but how do I want to approach this? Because Stephen Moffat is a very divisive figure in the Doctor Who fandom. You have people who really like him and people who really hate him. And as for his work, again, you'll find a wide array of opinions. There are people who think his best work came when he was a writer under Russell T Davies. There are people who really like his era as showrunner. There are people who think his one-off isolated scripts are better than his overarching stuff. I'm kind of in the middle. When Moffat is good, he is really good. And when he's bad, he is really bad. Just some examples of his really good scripts. He wrote Blink. He wrote The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances. He wrote my favorite 10th Doctor script, 10th Doctor story, Silence in the Library, The Forest of the Dead. He wrote my favorite 12th Doctor story and what is at the moment tied for my favorite revival series story, World Enough in Time, The Doctor Falls. And then there is, of course, Heaven Sent is another prime example of Moffat at his best. And then, of course, there are stories that the fandom generally does not like for him and sometimes are often seen as some of the worst stories in all of Doctor Who. Like The Wedding of River Song is one of those ones. Hell Bent, Twice Upon a Time. He wrote, along with writing my favorite story of the revival series, he wrote my least favorite story, again, in all of Doctor Who, The Witch's Familiar. So, this is one of Moffat's better scripts. All of that was to say that Moffat has a wide array of work across Doctor Who, and similarly, such a wide array of work has a wide array of quality. Boom is one of his better scripts. I don't know if I would say it's one of his best, but it is certainly one of his stronger scripts. I think for me, boiling it down to its base elements, I only really have 3 issues with this story, and I will talk about them at the end because I want to get the plot stuff out of the way and the stuff I really like first. So, what is the plot? Well, the Doctor and Ruby arrive in a war zone, and as they hear a scream, they go to investigate, and the Doctor steps on a landmine. And of course, with how landmines work, the Doctor is forced to stay on this mine until he can and try to figure out the solution to this entire thing. I want to get this joke out of the way. This is not a criticism at all. It's a joke everyone's making. It's a joke I made as well. And I just want, if you haven't heard it, I just want to share it. It's hey, remember the opening scene of the 4th Doctor story, Genesis of the Daleks, when the 4th Doctor steps on a mine? And then Harry Sullivan and Sarah Jane Smith have to get him off of it before it explodes? What if we did that for an entire episode? It's a really simple premise. The Doctor is just trapped, stuck on a landmine, trying to figure out a way to get off and resolve this conflict. But the simplicity of the premise is, 1, what makes it work, and 2, is what allows this episode to explore some really deep and complex themes and messages. Stick a pin in that, because that is one of my issues with this story. So first of all, the performances. I think in terms of performance, this is one of Ncuti Gatwa's best performances so far. Because since The Giggle, he's been giving these really jumpy, jittery, high energy sort of manic performance. He's all over the place, he's bouncing around. Again, it's really energetic, but this episode, because of this premise really limits the Doctor. He has to slow down, he has to be quiet, and it really allows the severity of the situation to sink in, that in a way that some of those other some of those severe situations that the Doctor's been in previous episodes really hasn't. Like, this is Ncuti Gatwa's episode, hands down. Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday is also really good. There's, where was I going with this? Because, and we're kind of going through the trend. So the church on Ruby Road was Ruby's first meeting with the Doctor, and if you want to count it, it is their adventure on modern day Earth. And then Space Babies was the Doctor and Ruby in the far future, technically on a human / possibly Earth colony. They never say where the baby farm is from. And then The Devil's Cord was Ruby's first adventure in the past. And then now we have Boom, Ruby's first adventure on an alien world. And similarly, like, we get a really good sort of expansion on Ruby as a character here. She really wasn't the focus. Like, she had a really strong introduction in the church on Ruby Road. She had really good energy and chemistry with Gatwa and Space Babies. That kind of showed a little bit about her character, but like I said in my review for that episode, I feel in Space Baby she was written a little too much like Rose. And then she didn't really get much focus in The Devil's Cord. She just was kind of reacting to this confrontation between the Doctor and the Maestro. Here she does get a good bit of focus. Millie Gibson gives a fantastic performance. She plays off Ncuti Gatwa really well, especially in their more tense moments. And then there's a huge chunk in the middle of the episode where Ruby's taken out of commission. Again, stick a pin in that. Because that's gonna tie into probably my biggest issue with this episode. This is a bottle episode, so we have an isolated set. Like, for the most part, this entire episode takes place in this one location with a very small cast of characters. The Doctor, Ruby, and arguably 5 more characters, I think. As they try to figure out this situation. I really like the theming of this episode because I feel like because this is a Moffat script, if you're going to compare this to another Doctor Who episode, I think most comparisons are going to go to Oxygen, which was not a Moffat script, but it was a Moffat era episode, and it's one of the Capaldi era's best episodes, but it has a lot of those same anti-capitalist themes about how a human being's life is perfectly expendable in a capitalist society. But this goes for a different angle to that theming. Whereas Oxygen, it was very much the workforce. Here in Boom, sorry, my mind is blanking on episode names, it is more war profiteering. Companies have profit in war, so they are going to find ways to perpetuate and continue the war. And ultimately, the twist that's revealed is really genius and kind of shows how far capitalism would go, because we are kind of in situations like this right now, like the opiate war, or like the war on terror was a thing. Like, meaningless, pointless wars with no real enemy, because companies are profiting off the war itself. Which I really don't have. I will say one thing, just in terms of design, like, that's a perfect example too. For example, there are machines on the battlefield called ambulances, but they are meant to determine a soldier's health and decide if they are fit enough, if they're just fit enough to go on. And if they are not, the ambulances will kill them, because it is just more costly to try and keep them alive and help them recover. I don't like so early on in the episode, the ambulances kind of play to the Jaws effect. You see maybe like a shot here where only part of them is on screen, a shot there where only a part of them is on screen. Most you'll see is the screen with the interface, which kind of takes the form of this old woman. And then in the climax of the episode, they're revealed fully, and the effect is greatly diminished because they're these tiny looking little tank robots, and they just look silly. Conceptually, I make sense because of what the ambulances do, you know, terminate people if they deem the recovery is too costly. Of course, ambulances are not big enough to carry patients, but just ultimately the reveal is just of what they actually look like is just goofy, and it kind of ruins the earlier effect because when you only saw bits and pieces of them on screen, they were playing to the Jaws effect, which gets its name, of course, from the movie Jaws, because Steven Spielberg had so many issues with the shark animatronic in the saltwater. He had to sort of edit the movie around it, so like you'd only get little glimpses here and there, and ultimately what you didn't see, what your imagination made up, is so much scarier than what you ultimately did see. And that's what the ambulances were doing here until the reveal kind of ruined it. Speaking of performances, we have another the side characters are mostly good. The standout of the side cast is Virata Sethu as the character of Mundi, which is really interesting too because we know next year for series 15 slash season 2, Millie Gibson is going to be leaving, and Virata Sethu is going to become Gatwa's next companion. And this episode has kind of interestingly led to some speculation on that. Like, because when this episode ends, the Doctor tells Mundi and the characters that he'll be coming back to check up on them. So, it's led to this speculation that when Virata Sethu becomes a companion, will she be joining the crew, the TARDIS, as Mundi, or do we have a Freema Agyeman or Karen Gillan situation here? If you're unfamiliar, in I think it was Army of Ghosts Doomsday in Series 2, Freema Agyeman showed up as another character, and then when Series 3 rolled around, she joined the 10th Doctor as Martha Jones, or in Series 4, in The Fires of Pompeii, Karen Gillan had a small role as a religious acolyte, and then of course in Series 5 she joined the TARDIS as Amy Pond. So given again it's just that's what this debate is here. When Virata Sethu joins the TARDIS next year, is it going to be as Mundi or as a new character? And honestly, I feel like it could really go either way because it seems like this era has a much stronger focus on serialization. It's not entirely serialized like Flux was, but there is a stronger driving force for an overall narrative. And just the other thing that could give credence to it either way, whether she's going to return as her character or not, is, aside from the way this episode ends, is just how early the news dropped. If memory serves, the news that Millie Gibson was going to be leaving in Series 15, Season 2, and that Virata Sethu was going to become the next companion, dropped before Series 14, Season 1, even aired. Like, it dropped in that gap of time between The Church on Ruby Road and Space Babies. So, I feel like because of the news dropping, of when the news dropped and the way this episode ends, it really could go either way. All of this to say Virata Sethu, again, just gave a really standout performance in this episode. I think that's really all I have to say in terms of praise for this episode. It's a really strong bottle episode. Gatwa gives one of his best performances yet. Millie Gibson is good. Virata Sethu is great. I am always a sucker for anti-capitalist messages, especially in sci-fi. So let's get into my big issues with this episode. Like I said, I only have 3. So the first is, along with the anti-capitalist, anti-war profiteering message, Stephen Moffat has several different commentaries going on. And while the anti-capitalist one is the clearest, the others don't come off as strong. So he has a message that me and one of my friends believes very strongly targets the American healthcare system, because the American healthcare system is the only one in the world that is for profit, and it sucks. So, similarly, like, again, the way the ambulances view patients, if treatment is too costly or too severe, they will just terminate them. Like, actually, it feels like a lot of the stuff Moffat is targeting is American in particular, which, again, given the American industrial complex, given for profit healthcare, given capitalism, like, yeah, no, say it, Moffat. There is also this weird message about faith. Like, Mundi, Verada Sethu's character, some of the other characters we meet, they're all Anglicans, and, like, they all have the priest collars as well, and they're going into war. And towards the end of the episode, the doctor sort of calls them out on their faith, like saying, oh, just saying you answer to a higher power makes it so much easier to follow orders. And then at the end, he kind of reverses his criticism, like saying, I don't believe in faith, but it's nice that you have it. Like, this is the issue I'm trying to build up to. Moffat has so many messages going on in this episode that while some of them come out very clearly, some of them it's just, what are you trying to say? Like, I don't get what you're going for. And like the religious one in particular is a big one. Though I will say, I do like how that particular scene ends, because it's a common concept in Doctor Who and sci-fi in general to sort of denigrate faith. Like, at best, in a sci-fi story, if you are a practitioner of any kind of faith, at best, you are a moron. At worst, you are in a cult. So, like, I am not a religious person myself, but, like, oftentimes, depending especially on how strong you lean into it, the way sci-fi is so disrespectful of faith can be a little off-putting at times. So, again, while that ending scene kind of muddles whatever Moffat is trying to say, I do like that it's there because it doesn't really denigrate faith. The other issue I have is the character of Splice. Splice is the daughter of a soldier in this episode, and she does kind of play an important role. First of all, the child actor is okay. It's not the best performance I've ever seen from a child actor. She has a couple of deliveries that are very flat, but it's not the worst. I have seen worse performances from child actors, and I'm not going to bash a child for not giving a good performance. There's several factors into that. But I do have some issues. One, logistically, why would you get permission to and bring a child to a war zone? That has some issues. Like, I feel like the episode kind of implies, because her father is her last surviving next of kin. She really had nowhere else to go. But again, just why would you bring a child into a war zone? But also, like, I have issues with the way this character is written, because, like, if you listen to her, she's looking for her dad. She stubbornly refuses to listen to anyone else. She will only listen to her dad. Like, she doesn't get, like, she has to be, when she sees the doctor has her father's remains, she tries to grab for them, which makes Ruby restrain her. Like, the big issue I'm trying to build up to here is this character is written much younger than the actress they cast her as. Like, I'm not a good gauge of this, but it looks like that actress is 11, 12 years old, but she's saying things that maybe a 6 or 7 year old would say, and she's acting like the way a 6 or 7 year old would act. And it's especially grating because at the end there is an explanation for this. She has that when the doctor apologizes for the fact her dad's dead. He says, I'm sorry your father's gone. And she says, he's not gone. He's just dead. He's not gone. I feel like if there was some line for her at some point before the episode, before the end, that would help everything a little bit better. But up until that point, this character is just written younger than the actress they cast is. And that might just be, again, another production thing, because to use a younger actor, there are more stringent requirements about that, because, like, And it's a time and money thing that a TV show probably couldn't afford to do, whereas say a movie could. So it's like it's something that doesn't entirely work, but I do understand why it is the way it is. It's just it is still on mark against the episode. And then the final thing, just the more I think about this, the more it kind of bugs me. And this is something a little more speculative, admittedly, but because we kind of have to see how it's going to play out. And like I said, this is a recurring thing, it seems to be, for this season, at least for me. The manifestation of the series arc, once again. Every time this arc shows up, it is the weakest part of this episode. Maybe not Space Babies, but I have a lot of problems with Space Babies, to be fair. But yeah, it was the weakest part of the Devil's Cord, and it is again the weakest part in Boom. So every time the Doctor and Ruby reach a point where they have to harken back to the events on Church and Ruby Road and the events of Ruby's mother leaving her at the church doorstep, every snow always manifests around Ruby. You know, it manifested when the Doctor flashed back in Space Babies and the flashback changed. When the Maestro was trying to steal the music from Ruby in the Devil's Cord, it manifested again. Here in Boom, it manifests again when Ruby is shot. And when she goes unconscious, the snow freezes in time. I am starting to become, counting the Church on Ruby Road, we are now 4 episodes into this season, which I think only has 8 episodes. But again, counting up the Church on Ruby Road, that's going to be 9. And just, I am very concerned about where this arc is heading. Because again, you know, the snow manifested in and of itself, it's fine. That's been the recurring theme. But the fact it freezes when Ruby goes unconscious. Again, a lot of this is speculation, and it's going to hinge on however this arc ends. But again, I am very concerned that this arc is playing into the new Who trope of character is uber mega important plot device. And just a lot of this now, the way the arc manifested in this episode, is compounding from what we got in the Devil's Cord. So I'm going to talk about it here because I didn't talk about it in the Devil's Cord. So while they were facing the Maestro, the Doctor talked about this idea of the Pantheon. You know, that the Toymaker and the Maestro are from a pantheon of other similarly godlike interdimensional beings. And then, you know, of course, we've had hints of another one, you know, in the Star Beast. Wow. In the Star Beast, the Meep mentioned the boss. And then, of course, in the Giggle and the Devil's Cord, the Toymaker and the Maestro both referenced the One Who Waits. Which just, I'm going to assume the boss and the One Who Waits are the same thing. I don't think Davies is going to, especially for a mystery box he's building up to, I don't think Davies is going to introduce more than one cosmic entity. Now, in the Devil's Cord, while the Maestro was trying to steal the music from Ruby, they mentioned sensing the presence of the Oldest One. Again, I'm going to assume is the One Who Waits within Ruby. I am really worried that this arc is setting up that Ruby is a member of this pantheon and that she is some kind of freaking god. Again, this is all speculative, and again, we have to see how the arc is going to play out, but it's like, if it goes this way, I am going to be severely disappointed because, again, in his first era, during the 10th Doctor era, Davies never missed an opportunity to make the Doctor God. And this time around, you know, it looks like Davies learned from that terrible idea because the Doctor is facing gods this time around, and they are actually gods. There is no hand-wavy explanations that they're aliens or something else posing as gods. And, you know, the Doctor's not exerting his authority to be the highest authority in the universe. Like, it looked like Davies learned his lesson. But depending on where this arc with Ruby goes, that it's just going to be so disappointing if it's going the way I think it's going to be going. Sorry, that was something that's just been building up with me, and I had to vent it out and let it breathe. But yeah, Boom overall is a fantastic episode. Like, the points against it don't really do much to hamper my enjoyment of this episode. Its simple premise really allows it to explore some complex themes. Excuse me. And it's got great performances from Millie Gibson, Verada Sethu, and in particular Shruti Gatwa. But those are just my thoughts. Have you seen Boom yet? What are yours? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you'll find the link to my socials where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.